A Tale of Two Buttons. I suppose I do regret being a virgin. It's something I think about quite a lot, actually. Not that I tell my sister that, but I have wondered sometimes what it would be like to be unbuttoned by a calloused hand, or even a manicured hand, one with a faint waft of cologne. On the other hand, I've seen how rough men can be. I've seen those big bold buttons on smocks and linen shirts out there chopping wood in the cold when there's ice on the water bucket. Would I really like that? And I've seen them come back with bruises and scrapes when the men have had to cut trees and carry those great rocks for the dry stone walls. Would I really have liked that? Rough life? Part of me says yes. I would like to have felt the wind on my face, or the burn of the sun. I would like to have felt the touch of grass, a roll in the hay. What would that have felt like? But here I am. Here I am. We've lived in all sorts of places, my sister and I. Little tin houses. We've literally been on the shelf for years. And I've just had to live my life as a dream. I've often wondered what it would have been like if I'd been sewn on some grand lady's coat or dress. But look at me. I'm not grand, am I? No. No, I'm the sort of button that would have been attached to some homely domestic garment. I would have been splashed from the sink as the washing up was done. I would have bent down and seen the broom sweep the dirt from the floor, empty the cat's bowls, swill out the pigs. Not for me, the high life. Now, if I'd been covered with satin, or if I'd had a diamante in the middle of my face, on my head, like some Indian queen or princess, what sort of life would I have seen then? Oh, what sort of life would I have seen then? In my imagination, I have walked down the Byzantine way, from Lefkos to the sea. I've walked where the ancients walked. I've followed the paths of donkeys, of horses. I've walked in the footsteps of soldiers and peasants, of princes and slaves, of lovers. I've walked with them all. Just because I'm a plain little old lady doesn't mean to say I haven't imagination, that I haven't had dreams. I've heard other buttons whispering. Sometimes I've been in a box with other buttons that have come back from another life, recycled. And they've told me tales, tales of excitement, tales of love and passion, tales of death, tales of sadness, tales of weariness, of woe. But here we are, me and my sister, spinster ladies, side by side, still attached to our own little home. In the end, when I stop to think about it, would I swap my quiet safety for a life that knew the sweat of toil, the bitter wildness of wind and rain? Would I want to return to my button box at some future time, torn by the passions of love and loss, scarred by the vagaries and misadventures of life? Yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, do give over, Iris. I know what she's doing, wobble-wobbling like that. She's having one of her daydreams. They make her all excited and trembly. What you dreaming about, Iris, I'd say, and she'd turn to me all snotty like, a better life, Maeve, you wouldn't understand. Too bloody right I wouldn't understand. Me, I see nothing wrong with being plain. Plain Jane, that's me. And proud. Why my sister have to have these fantasies? I know exactly when she does, and the reason I know is because I see her trembling. She says it's because somebody's walking past the shelf and making our tin wobble, but I know the wobble's coming from inside her because she's dreaming of a better life. Now me, I'm happy with who I am. There's nothing wrong with being working class. I'd be quite content to be sewn onto some little pulley of a hard-working woman who knew what she was about. Someone who knew how to make a good rice pudding and how to keep a hubby happy. Well, not in the way you're thinking. I don't hold much of that, but you know what I mean. someone who could bake a nice sponge and keep the front room clean. I'm not ashamed of my roots. I'm rather proud of them, truth be told. I'd rather be an honest worker than a fly-by-night. I think those fancy buttons that go pouncing around with bits of diamante stuck to their heads, oh, my sister, she's mentioned that, she's mentioned the diamante. I think that's all flash in the pan. No, I don't mind being plain. But if I were to have a little fancy, and I don't indulge, not like Iris, but if I was to, think a bit, then I'd like to be sewn onto the bosom of the cook we used to have in our old house. That was when our tin was kept on the kitchen shelf. Don't ask me why, but it was. Oh, the smell of her fried bacon, I tell you, to die for. When our sisters were taken off, and I don't know where, and me and Iris were left on our own, the lid of our button tin was left on the latch, as it were, and I used to peep through the crack. You know what I saw? On a Sunday night, I'd see Cookie at the table with a hunk of white bread, and I'd watch her spread this bread with a thick wodge of dripping. Oh, I could even see the little brownie bits from the bottom of the bowl, and I tell you, my mouth watered. It did, it literally watered. Now, if I had a fantasy, like my sister, it would be of me, sewn perhaps on Cookie's pinny, where the bit round her neck joined the bib, and she'd be eating her bread and dripping, and a little bit of that brown juicy stuff would just drip off the edge of her finger and land with a silent little plop into my open mouth. Ooh, don't start me off, I'll be trembling just like my sis. But unlike Iris, and frankly I think she has a problem in this department, I've never really fancied being attached to a man somehow. I think there's something about men that's just a little bit uncomfortable. Do you know what I mean? I like the thought of being rubbed against perhaps a little knitting needle. Perhaps a small knitting needle making babies' booties, or a nice warm cardie. That could be for Grandpa. I don't mind men when they get a bit older and not, well, But the thing about us plastic buttons is that we're pretty much indestructible. I know there's a fancy new word now, isn't there? Non-biodegradable, something like that. So it has occurred to me to wonder, sometimes, on a down day, and we all get down days, don't we? I have wondered sometimes whether I'm going to be in this button box forever. Once we were in a button box which was quite nice because it had a sort of flowered wallpaper. Still, the point is, will we go on forever? And if we don't, what sort of end will we have, my sister and me? Now, I don't want to be morbid, I don't hold with morbid, but if I was to allow myself just a little daydream, then I think when me and Iris were to be, as it were, laid to rest, then I'd like it to be in the corporation tip. Because I heard Cookie say once that the local tip had been landscaped with lovely trees and grass, and she said there were seagulls wheeling overhead. I've never seen a seagull, of course, and I'm not sure I know what wheeling overhead means, but somehow she made the tip sound like a sort of paradise, a button paradise. To find yourself dropped at last into earth with green grass and blue sky and white birds wheeling. I think I'd like that one day. Maeve, are you trembling? Don't be so daft, Iris.